travel mug, and hello. Okay, well, I guess this isn't technically a travel mug, but it's a travel-themed mug, so I'm going with it because it's on theme. Welcome to episode 16 of the Gilmore Way Podcast. When we think about the Gilmore Girls, we can't help but think of Stars Hollow and its central role in the show, like in making the show what it is. But this week, we're heading out of Connecticut and talking about the moments when the characters hit the road. We have road trips, European backpacking, travel for work, and who can forget that one time Emily tried to timeshare a plane?
Epic. Before we get going, this is your last chance to get off of this train before you get hit with spoilers for the entire series. So if you want to avoid those, please disembark now. And if you could just do the YouTube things like hitting that like and subscribe button, we are always eternally grateful for that. Let's get into our recaps.
Let's do it. All right. Season 2, Episode 3, Red Light on the Wedding Night. Max has returned from teaching for the summer in Toronto. Shout out. And now he and Lorelai wrap up wedding plans and start getting used to spending more time together as he prepares to move into her house. They go on a double date with Rory and Dean, during which Dean provides valuable information on their habits. And the night ends with Max and Lorelai fighting over exactly what Max's role around the house will be after he tries to set boundaries with Rory and Dean unnecessarily. The time has come for Lorelai's bachelorette party, and a romantic story from Emily about trying on her wedding dress every night leading up to her wedding to Richard has everyone calling their sweethearts. Except Lorelai, who calls Christopher, and finally tells him that she's engaged. Max is angry that Lorelai still hasn't given him a set of keys to the house and accuses her of being selfish. He's right. Luke builds Lorelai a chuppah as an apology for being so critical of Max. Stars Hollow gets its first red light, and on the eve of her wedding, Lorelai realizes she doesn't want to marry Max because she doesn't want to try on her dress every night. She tells Rory she broke it off and pitches going on a road trip, leaving early the next morning.
This is followed up by episode 4, the road trip to Harvard. And in this episode, we see Rory and Lorelai hitting the road with no particular destination in mind. They decide to stop at a funky B&B in New Hampshire, run by an acquaintance of Lorelai, but it turns out that it was bought out the previous year by LaDawn, love her, who has turned it into a stereotypical nightmare B&B, complete with stomach-churning small talk. Sammy's on the stairs, though, so there's a plus.
And Sammy.
Yep. The next day, Lorelai and Rory head to Harvard, where Rory gets a taste for life at college, and Lorelai reflects on everything that she has missed out on. When they return to Stars Hollow, Lorelai calls Suki and says that she wants to take the plunge and start moving on opening their own inn, but she must also tell Emily that the engagement is off.
Yeah. I love Road Trip to Harvard. It's among my favorite episodes.
Mm-hmm. Your shirt is apropos, obviously.
Can't you tell? We were at Harvard this summer. Go check out our entire episode about our epic New England road trip if you haven't already.
Yeah, we got to some Ivies. I think we'll get back to them. But yeah, we do want to get back to them, and I think we will at some point. But yes, go watch that episode. The campuses there are gorgeous. There's so much to see. So just do it.
Actually, no, 3. We were briefly at Princeton.
Yeah. But watch the episode, but also visit those campuses yourself. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah. It's not like we were inspired by Road Trip to Harvard or anything. No. So, yeah. Clearly I'm in the spirit. Yeah, we don't get out of... Well, actually, we do get out of Stars Hollow. Maybe a little more than you would expect. Except for the fact that most of the time that they're out of Stars Hollow, they're not really out of Stars Hollow. They're just somewhere else on the lot on an interior set and pretending they're in Rome or London or Boston. You know, lots of different places that they purportedly go that are just still in Burbank, California.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is fun. I mean, I'm biased, but faux Burbank, California is probably still better than actual Boston.
Sorry, Boston, but you need to get your stuff together and like fix your traffic patterns. But why don't we start off with some of our favorite moments that take place outside of Connecticut? You go first.
Okay. I love A Vineyard Valentine.
Oh, yes. Underrated episode.
Underrated, but oh my gosh, I love seeing Rory and Logan there, but I love seeing Lorelai and Luke there. And Luke is out of his element. He's a fish out of water. I feel like when he travels, like his definition of traveling is just like, I'm gonna go fishing on a boat for a weekend. But him walking along the beach with Lorelai, having lobster, coming to love it, and then just like that, everything about that episode to me, I just really enjoyed. And that was a moment where I just loved, again, you had two couples that were there experiencing the weekend, but I loved seeing Lorelai and Luke just getting closer to one another in a setting that is not what probably Luke would have in mind. And he was a bit cynical about it, but he enjoyed it by the end of the weekend, and there were things to be gained. Problematic weekend aside, I mean, fights came up, but on the whole, again, I loved seeing them there, and I loved seeing Martha's Vineyard. And it's not the only instance we get of it, but that episode in particular stands out to me as something that I loved that was outside of Connecticut and Stars Hollow.
Yeah, that one's definitely on my list as well. I was watching that episode earlier and I was like, man, I love this episode. And I really want to be friends with Stan the raccoon.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and it's funny because once again, something's supposed to be in New England, not filmed in New England. It is, I think it's at Olivia Newton-John's house, if memory serves, somewhere in Southern California. So it wasn't on the lot, but it's still in California. And it's like very obviously not February in New England. There are like flowers and green grass, and they're not wearing heavy parkas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love all the points you just made about watching those relationships. And, you know, Lorelai and Luke really seem to finally get through some of their communication problems and finally start confronting the issue of putting off talking about the wedding. And I love how they sort of have that reckoning with each other and then have a great night of sleep. Like the night before, Luke doesn't sleep well. He's all grumpy. The waves kept him up and Stan kept him up. And, you know, he was just being a total grump about it. But after they finally talk to each other for once in a while, like finally, they both sleep like babies.
Mm-hmm. Well, until Mitchum shows up.
Well, no, they were awake by then. I love watching them lounge in bed with like the breakfast Santa, and you know, it's very cute watching them sort of talk about the past and the future, like talking about that beach that they both used to go to, and Luke proposes eloping, and yeah, it's just a really nice moment for them, and I love watching them interact with Logan and Rory, because this really feels like Rory growing up. You know, she's in a stable relationship. She's really happy with Logan. She even says like, these could be the ones. So I love that moment. And I also love that it gives Lorelai a bit more of a window into Logan and gives her some sympathy for him. She is able to bond with him over disappointing your parents. And I think that's a lovely moment where they really start to connect. And it continues through season 7 as well. So it's really nice that Lorelai can finally see Rory and Logan together, because she's really only heard stories about Logan thus far. And, you know, she hasn't maybe been his biggest fan because she's only getting these like secondhand tidbits. But now she can see what Logan is really like and how he sort of exists in the real world. And I think that's where she starts warming up to him. So I love that episode. Another one I love is Rory skipping school to go see Jess in New York. I, again, watched that episode fairly recently, and it's just one of those really out of character moments for Rory to be so spontaneous. Maybe she's getting something from her mom, because in Road Trip to Harvard, Lorelai tries to get her to be spontaneous and go somewhere without a map and just not plan things. And
horrifying.
She does that. I know, we cannot abide that strategy, but Rory kind of seems to take that to heart and spontaneously skip school to go see Jess. And yeah, any thoughts on that episode?
I mean, my heart, like a piece of my heart is always going to be in New York. You know why, but for anyone who's watching, I have lived my entire life and grown up 30 minutes outside of New York City. there's a hill by my house where you can see the entire outline of Manhattan. And for as gross as the city can be sometimes, and Luke calls that out where he's like, this place is disgusting. He's not entirely wrong. It can smell. I'll give it that. But New York City is its own heartbeat. It's its own place. Lauren Graham acknowledges that in her book, which go read it if you haven't, because it's amazing. But I love the New York City episodes. So I love seeing Rory skipping school to go visit Jess, and just, knowing that that's my back. The Bengals. Yep. I was about to say, but just knowing like that's your backyard, and kind of like knowing like, oh, I know where these characters are or where they're supposed to be, and I can recognize that. I do love the Bengals episode where they go into the city to see the concert. So, yeah, it just hits home because that's where I've grown up. I'll selfishly say I would have loved to have seen Rory and Lorelai actually participating in New York City sporting endeavors, but can't have them all.
That is fair. Yeah. New York almost doesn't feel like travel because it's like 2 hours away, but it is technically outside of Connecticut, and quite a few things do happen there. So, it makes some sense that things happen there. The Bengals concert is the very first time we go anywhere besides Stars Hollow or Hartford. So that's fairly significant. And then in the revival, New York actually plays quite a role as well, because Rory moves out of her Brooklyn apartment. Paris lives there, so Rory stays with her sometimes. They do that GQ line article in New York, and they talk about the street carts with the coffee and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's where she memorably sleeps with a Wookiee. So yeah, New York is just ever present. Logan lives there for a while in season 7, so it's a fairly substantial place in the show.
Yeah, New York is a person.
New York is a person.
Stole that from Lauren, so I'll give her credit, but she's right. New York is a person. And I love seeing it represented in the show in the way that it was. I wish we would have gotten more of it, especially since they are so close, so it's easy for them to visit, but I'll take what we got, and I'll just be thankful for it.
Yeah. Any other favorite episodes outside of?
Yeah, I will say, I'm going to go back to like Martha's Vineyard and the revival and seeing Emily flourishing there, which we've already talked about in previous episodes, so I won't go on about that too much. But I love that she retires there and finds a career path and a passion there. And the scenery is just beautiful. So it just, I've never personally been, but it seems like a wonderful place to visit. But that's just another instance of a moment that I love in the show, just seeing Emily really coming into her own there, and getting on with Berta's family in a way, and just really being happy in a way that I think we never saw her be content in her life up until then.
Yeah, you can tell that like something about Nantucket just really brings out like something indefinable in Emily. Just peace. It feels like she's at peace there. And I can see why, because like just that moment when she's standing outside and just looking out over the water, I'm like, I would be at peace there too. And that coastal grandma vibe is like really up my alley. So yes, please give me more. So yeah, I too love Emily's story in Nantucket. Speaking of Emily, there's the rub. I don't know that this one actually takes place outside of Connecticut. They don't tell us where the Birch Grove spa is. I'm assuming it's fictional, but I put it on the list because it requires them going somewhere together and staying in a hotel room at a spa. So I count it as travel. But I just think it's one of those beautiful Lorelai and Emily moments where they finally start to break down the wall between them a little bit and explain where that gap is. And it's hilarious. Like, it's a really funny episode. Like, Emily booking them couples massages and putting all of their treatments together and bugging Lorelai while she's got those like heater mitts on her hands. Yeah, I love that episode. The cucumber water.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shrimp cocktail and a steak dinner.
How do you feel about what we get of Lorelai and Rory going overseas?
Ooh,
and backpacking? We don't really see it. We just know of it. But we're told of some of the places that they visit. We have what I think is like just a hilarious comedic moment from Babette being like, when you guys didn't come home on time, like I was calling every single consulate, like y'all were supposed to be home Saturday night. Yeah, so just shout out to that. But what do you think of their whole backpacking trip? How Emily and Richard view traveling overseas in that way? What do you make of all that?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's sort of one of the most significant travel moments on the show because there's so much buildup for it and expectation. The first time it's mentioned is in the third episode of the series when Rory tells Richard that they're planning to backpack the minute she graduates, and she's telling him about her yen for travel and wanting to visit Fez. And then it comes up again in the third Lorelai when Trix wants to offer the money, and Emily tries to convince Lorelai that Rory will want to go without her if she gets the money. And I don't think she's right about that. I think Lorelai is maybe one of the only people she could do a trip like that with and like actually enjoy herself. And then we don't really hear too much about it again until Dear Richard and Emily. And I just, again, love that episode. And I love how they tie the past and the present together with the travel books. The cold open is Rory coming in with the new travel books and showing them to her mom. And then Emily and Richard start looking at them and they're like, what kind of travel books are these? The cheap kind. And then they're very judgmental about the fact that they want to travel spontaneously and stay at hostels and take trains. And they're like, you can be spontaneous and still stay in a proper hotel room. Like, let me call my travel agent for you. And they're like, we want to do it on the cheap. So, Emily and Richard don't understand the concept of traveling on a budget.
No, definitely not.
Completely goes over their head.
We fly first class everywhere.
Exactly. It costs a fortune to fly first class to Europe. We only do it once every 2 years. And then the horrified look on their faces when Lorelai suggests they fly coach.
How very dare you?
How dare you? Yeah, and Emily says her first time traveling to Paris, she stayed at the Ritz.
Okay.
All right, Emily. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, even first class every 2 years, it's like, I still couldn't even do that. So get out of here. Like, oh, we can only do it every 2 years. Like, just shut up, Emily. I love you, but shut up.
They have European luggage. Luggage specifically to travel to Europe. Excuse me? What? It's probably Vuitton.
Yeah.
Knowing Emily. Yeah.
It probably is. I mean, Rory got a Birkin bag, so she knows her designers. Yeah. She knows what's up.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that episode where Emily sends the books as well. And Lorelai picks up the box and she's like, Rory, are you ordering from Amazon again? We're going to have to get your books their own house. Relatable, for one. And then she says that great line of, it's heavy. Must be her hopes and dreams for me. I thought she got rid of those years ago.
Yeah.
And they're looking through Myra Waldo's Travel and Motoring Guide to Europe, 1978. And Lorelai's response is, this will be really useful in planning our trip. Hey, you want to go see the Berlin Wall? I just love that. And then they flash back to Christopher saying that he doesn't want to go to college and he wants to backpack around Europe, which probably is something that influenced Lorelai quite a bit. I mean, we know that she wanted to get out of that house and go anywhere and see something in a way that her parents' version of travel wouldn't allow her to. And she even points out, they're going to stay somewhere fancy and go places where they won't have to actually interact with anyone who lives there. So they'll see high culture and history, but not pop culture or like local culture, local flavor. So it's a really limited way to travel. I mean, it sounds swanky and high class, and I'm sure many people would like to do it, but that's not maybe how you get the best experience when traveling. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love that she points that out. And I think it's possibly what planted the seed for this whole backpacking trip. And she held on to that for years with Rory and made that suggestion of like, I wanted to do this with Christopher when the minute I could, but it never happened and I want to do it with you. So
yeah. How do you think the show approaches how they just how travel is viewed on the whole? Because we see, I'm just going to focus in on Lorelai and Rory. They both travel extensively over the course of the show to different places, but a lot of the times they're also doing it for very different reasons. And I'll start off with this. I think, especially with Lorelai, a lot, not all, but some and or a lot of her travel was just bent on escapism and trying to run away from her problems and life a lot of the time. Do you think that's good, bad? What are the positives and negatives to it? And how do you think the show paints that picture for us in terms of potentially, yes, Lorelai is viewing travel in an escapism sort of way. Too much? Not enough? What do you think?
I want to go with too much. They travel to outrun their problems a lot. A lot. It happens in Road Trip to Harvard when, as I mentioned in the summary, Lorelai is running away from the fact that she just broke up with Max and she needs to do something. Like she has to be moving and flying by the seat of her pants as a way to take her mind off of the intense grief that she might be feeling without that. And that, I don't know if it was healthy or not. I think, probably not, but also maybe it was good for them to get out. And it was nice for Rory to be able to see Harvard and ignite that, that passion for her to really get a feel for the place. And I like the moment when she returns home and sees the chuppah in the yard and sort of actually, I'm going to back that up a little. When they drive back into town, they sort of drive around looking and they're like, every time I go away and come back, I expect something to be different, but it never is. And then she sees the chuppah and is like, well, I guess everything's the same. And it just goes to show that you can only run for so long, but you have to come back eventually. And when you do, those problems are still going to be there. You still have to process that. You still have to deal with it. And we see that maybe she doesn't do the best job of that. Because even when they got that ice cream maker a couple episodes later, she couldn't even handle accepting a gift that she couldn't return because it represented her failed relationship. So I don't think escaping in that instance was in order for her to process it. It was in order for her to avoid it. And she wouldn't even talk about it with Rory while they were there. So that's the first one I can think of. And then we have when Rory runs away to Europe again with Emily to do it right. I love that moment when Emily says, I'll call Raffi and tell him to bump another Baptist in order to get Rory on her flight because it was full, but then she had her travel agent work his magic. So Rory trying to escape the situation with Dean and her mom's judgment about it and just go away for the summer to clear her head. And she comes back and realizes, oh crap, now I'm behind everyone. I didn't take a job. I didn't take an internship. Everyone at the paper has, had articles printed in other publications and has done something with their summer to forward their professional goals. And I just frittered away my summer in Europe. So unhealthy. And then, and Emily is also running from her problems in that episode too, because that's when her marriage to Richard has disintegrated. And so 2 out of the 3 of the Gilmore Girls are running from their problems. So not great. When Rory goes to Philly to see Jess when she's mad at Logan and ends up kissing him, like that's a 3-hour drive, or 4 hours if you take the train. Like that was premeditated. She knew what she was doing. That is not a quick jaunt down the road to see an old friend. That was, I'm going for something, you know? And then the last one I can think of is Gilmore Girls Only, when Rory originally says she can't go on the road trip to Mia's wedding, but then changes her mind when Logan pisses her off. And she's like, you know, I need to get out of here. I'm coming with you now to North Carolina.
Yeah.
Again, unhealthy. And Logan chases her down and apologizes, and, you know, they move forward at least. But once again, just hitting the road instead of
facing your problems
or communicating with people.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to book a flight than to have a hard conversation.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you don't need to do it. I will say this, like, I don't, but I think I'm safe in saying, like, we don't condone doing that. If you've got to have a hard conversation with somebody, you've got to have it. Don't use travel as an escape, because that's not what it's meant to be, and it takes the joy out of it. And there's a lot of joy to be had with travel, and a lot of positives that are to be gained from it. So when you taint it with that escapism aspect of it, you're just immediately giving it this negative connotation where you're going to think that you might be enjoying your time away, but you're basing that time away and the reality of where you're going and where you're at on a situation that you're running from. And you're never going to appreciate where you're at as much. So just don't diminish your time away in that regard. So I would say just don't use escapism.
Yeah.
In
what
that
do you
way.
think? Yeah. What do you think about the fact that, like, these 2 girls who are so interested to see the world, like, they end up in a small place like Stars Hollow that never changes, and, you know, it's not a very diverse or intriguing place. You know, they plant their roots so firmly there, and yet they want to get out into the world, but putting down those roots really stops them from doing that sometimes, you know? Like, I think that's part of the reason why Rory was so adamant about traveling and, like, wanting to see something. It's why one of the things that encouraged her or inspired her to be someone like Christiane Amanpour and go see the world. So what do you think it says about them that, you know, they've got so much wanderlust, and yet they picked one of the smallest, cutest white bread New England towns to call home?
Yeah. I think Rory does better with it over time than Lorelai does, in terms of, like, actually branching out and being willing to leave Stars Hollow. And Lorelai does it too, but at the end of the day, she's always brought back there, and she's always drawn back there. And it's a point that we've illustrated before, that Lorelai was probably going to never leave Stars Hollow, which is why Max was never the right guy for her, because he could never fit in there. Christopher was never going to be the right guy for her because he couldn't fit in there. And so what the town embodied for her and how important it was for her in terms of the roots that she had put in there, and how at home she felt there, just meant that, yes, she could travel, and she did, outside of Stars Hollow, but she was always going to come back there. I think Rory did better with being just more worldly and with being a bit more open-minded to recognize that I love Stars Hollow, but this is not, like, I don't want to put myself in this bubble and in this snow globe, and there's so much beyond this. And I think journalism was helpful for her to start to realize that there is so much more of the world that she could see. But I love that and just Rory's open-mindedness in general led her to just explore the world and say, like, I want to go to Prague, you know, I want to go. And just experience and see things that I like, some people may never be blessed or, have the opportunity enough to do. So I think it just speaks to open-mindedness and just having a worldview that is just, you're not so zoned in on where you are, and you're willing to expand and broaden your mindset in that way and experience other cultures, other religions, other cuisines. There's so much that travel can afford you when you let yourself do it. So I think it just speaks to just open-mindedness at the end of the day, that Rory is willing to do that and not diminish herself and put herself in this space where she's like, I can't leave here, nor do I want to, because this is all I need. She's very good at recognizing that the world has so much to offer me, and I want to experience all of it that I can.
Yeah, and I think Lorelai ends up being kind of the opposite, where when she was younger, she was very intrigued by travel. And I think to a degree she always was, but then she was too poor for several years while she, built up her savings so that she could buy a house and a car. Like, she was really just sinking everything into Rory and into saving for the future, which is totally understandable. Like, I didn't do a ton of traveling when I was younger. I moved to a different province for university and would travel back and forth a lot, but I still haven't been to Europe. I will go this year because now I have an English boyfriend and we'll have to go to his hood sometime. But like, I didn't have the money to jet set the way they did. So I totally understand that. But despite the fact that she got to do that with Rory, we don't really see her doing it much more later. She does the odd small trip. They did New York and they did North Carolina. And in the revival, she does Wild just to California. And most of the time, she's just happy being in Stars Hollow. She loves that town to death. And she loves it so much that she built her business there, which kind of leads me on to the next point that I kind of thought was interesting, which is the fact that Lorelai's Inn is a travel destination in itself. It's not travel for her because she, lives a few minutes away and goes normally. But she plays host as an inn manager to all kinds of tourists over the year. And like, I'm thinking specifically of Spring Fling as, something that's a real draw for out of towners who want that small town Connecticut charm. And Christiane Amanpour herself stays there, which is just a beautiful full circle moment that like you wouldn't expect, but I loved it. Like, do you think that Lorelai was so drawn to running her own inn because of her yen for travel? Like, she didn't have the means to do it herself, so she lived vicariously through her guests a little. Like, it was kind of her way to encounter interesting people from other places. Like, it makes sense to start out in a position as a maid at a hotel or an inn and maybe move on eventually to something else if like you gain enough experience and you have enough money to do something that you're more passionate about. But it seems that she really picked up a passion for like running an inn, and so she started her own. So do you think it was maybe sort of that like vicarious travel aspect that really drew her to that profession?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, she started out as a maid and then she worked her way up with Mia's help. But I think what kept her there at the inn and like, she could have gone on and done another job if she had been dissatisfied in that position and in like hospitality and management and all of those things. But she chose to stay. And so, yes, I think it absolutely stems from her having just such a desire to travel, but maybe not being able to do it as much as she wanted to. So when she sees people coming to the inn who are guests that she's responsible for, and for making sure that they have a good time, like there's a lot to be said there with like the interactions that you can have. Like, where are you from? Why are you traveling here? Like, tell me your story. And I think it even makes me think now that you say that of like LaDawn, and I feel like she was in the exact same boat as Lorelai with running the Cheshire Cat and just finding so much joy and positivity from it, because anytime that LaDawn had guests, she was always like, where are you from? Why are you here? Why are you passing through? LaDawn was obviously she was much more personable and chatty with her guests and encouraging socialization to an extent which almost might make your guests uncomfortable. Thankfully, Lorelai did not do that. Socialization was never really forced or planned, but I see what LaDawn was trying to do, and I can understand where that joy and that excitement for her is coming from. And I think, again, it just equates back to Lorelai, where you might not be able to get out and see the world as much as you want to, but when you have guests and people that are showing up at your doorstep, so to say, and at your, like in, whatever B&B, it's exciting to like just hear people's stories and know where they're traveling from, because that's also allowing you to see the world and experience different things in a way where I might never get to that place, but this person is from there, so they can tell me about it, and it'll still feel real to me and be an experience that I've never had. So, yes, to answer your question, I can absolutely see why Lorelai was living vicariously through her guests in that way.
Yeah. Okay, she named the place after an Alice in Wonderland character. This is my worst nightmare.
I mean, my worst nightmare is like, we're going to do bird watching at like 6 a.m.
Yeah. 6 a.m. is awful enough. But like, again, the idea of the forced mingling is just count me out. Hard pass. Mm-hmm. No. My social anxiety says no. So, yeah. How do you think travel changes our characters, or do you think it does?
I don't think it alters their persona too much. I think they enjoy the excursions and the outings that they're able to have, but I don't think it ever significantly changes any one of our main characters extensively. Lorelai still always comes back to Stars Hollow. Her mindset never changes in terms of just wanting to seek out more of the world or having that alter even her politics, her mindset. I don't think it does anything different for Rory either. Like, she just appreciates travel and the opportunities that it affords and a career path choice that it can allow for her. But I don't see it changing her either. Luke ventures out, he goes on cruises with Nicole, again, goes on trips with Lorelai. Lane gets shipped off to South Korea for a summer against her will.
With the world's largest suitcase that both of us need because we're insane overpackers. Yeah. Because traveling light is for girls.
Yes, it is. Yeah. If you've ever seen either one of us pack for a trip, like, we got problems.
We are not minimalists.
But yeah, I don't think it ever changes our characters in any significant way. I think they appreciate seeing the world, but I don't think it ever, again, changes philosophies or mindsets or alters them from that standpoint in any sort of significant way. And again, there's always like that trope of so many of our characters just always coming back to where they started out. No one really ever moves on. It's so often we just see them always coming back to where they began. So no, I don't think there's ever really significant change that we see from travel with any of our characters who experience that.
I have a few instances where I think it might do something to move the needle a little. Like you said, I don't think it fundamentally changes them. But there are a few examples that stand out to me for Rory specifically. I think the first one is when she goes to Washington between seasons 2 and 3.
Mhm.
This is the first time that she's really away from Lorelai for any significant amount of time. And oh, this is an instance I forgot of escapism. Well, I guess she doesn't choose to go, but it just so happens to fall at a time for her when things are getting a little steamy with Jess, but she's still with Dean and she's not sure of her feelings. And she,
Yeah.
like, it's obvious that she's trying to work through that and maybe trying to like make a choice or communicate something to these guys as she's writing letters, because it was 2003. And she was writing with a pen and paper. How cute.
Dear Jess.
Yeah, like Dean writes her 5 letters and you can see that she's writing to Jess instead, and it's like, okay. But yeah, it's the first time that they're really significantly apart from each other. And I also just love her in Washington. Like, well, I chose my Washington mug for that exact reason. Like, we hit Washington on our road trip last summer. I loved it. I was not expecting to love Washington as much as I did. And so I hope Rory had as much fun as I did and got to see the Library of Congress, because it is incredible. But she mentioned seeing Archie Bunker's chair at the Smithsonian. And I'm like, it's not the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian is the largest museum, education, and research institution in the entire world. And it's made up of 21 museums and the National Zoo. So, like, which Smithsonian? And it just so happens to actually be the American History Museum, which is the one that we actually made it to. So, but we didn't see Archie Bunker's chair.
We did not.
We did that. So that's sad. But like, I love that sort of like connection of, that happened to be somewhere that we've been as well. And the other thing I love about that is her bonding with Paris, putting them together in a room for 6 weeks, I think did a lot for their friendship. And her encouragement of Paris and Jamie up front was really nice. That conversation they have when she's brushing her hair and she's like, Jamie likes you. And if this doesn't work out, you'll find someone else. And she's like, what if I don't find someone else? What? I can't talk. What if I don't find someone else? Then you'll get some cats. I love that we always have that option.
As if that's like the worst thing that could ever happen. It's not.
Cats came to my house today. They know.
Fine. It's fine. Yeah. But I will say, I love that whole Washington plot point, just with Ridge saying, like, you just got asked out. And Paris is like, no, I didn't. And Rory's like, yeah, like, he could have asked you out for coffee if he just wanted to talk about the day. But, like, he asked you out to dinner. You're going to dinner. And Paris is just like, I got asked out to dinner. How was the ask out? Was it a good one? I wish I had actually
been there.
Yeah. But, like, we'll talk about, that more when we get to, like, female friendships. But I just love those moments where it's like, it's always so fun to me to see the friendship between Rory and Paris just growing, and how they're able to, like, just constantly be really good wing women for one another. So
yeah,
that was a highlight of the Washington aspect of things.
Yeah. And then the other one that I think may have changed Rory quite a bit was going to Europe with her grandmother and spending the entire summer staying in the finest hotels and seeing even more maybe than she saw the first time around, because she had the resources to be able to do it. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, Rory gets really bad in season 5 and it's because of Logan. Like, everybody assumes that Logan has this really negative impact on Rory and starts to give her these ideas about entitlement. But one, I think that starts way before. Like, I think Chilton starts that train and it continues all the way through. Like, she's really going downhill by season 4 at the latest. So I really don't think Logan was responsible for as much of it as people like to pin on him. But the other thing that people don't take into consideration or think about really is that she had just come off of an entire summer with Emily. Like, what if that's where she picked up a bunch of her bad habits and her ideas about what she deserves in life, Probably. So I think that might have been, one of those moments where she changed a lot more than she thought, because she basically immediately came back and started dating Dean again and was broken up with him a few episodes later, because now she has this real window into a world of privilege, and she likes it. She had fun with her grandma that summer, I'm assuming, and the male Yale party was awkward, but it just hit home for her how different her life is now and how Dean doesn't really fit into it. She doesn't want to admit it to herself, and she wants to hold on to that small town girl, I don't care about these things, but it's clear that she does care about them and that they mean something to her. So it might have started with Emily. Just gonna throw it out there.
Yeah. Emily is a great person to just, follow in those footsteps. You'll be fine.
Yeah, model grandmother.
Yeah. Don't do it. She's problematic. Go check out our last episode if you want more on that. And we'll get back to the problems with Emily and Richard again in the future. But yeah, not great.
Yeah. One we haven't really talked about in depth yet is the road trip to North Carolina. I think that's the first time the girls all travel together. And I think that's another one where they actually do quite a bit of, again, meeting in the middle, like really starting to understand each other better and, again, breaking down the walls a little bit. And it's funny how Emily just sort of invites herself along.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I heard there's this really great spa in North Carolina. Maybe I could just come with you. And then she has to drive and she doesn't go fast enough. And she's trying to control Lorelai's window. She won't let her have the window down.
Yep.
Such a mom thing to do. But your daughter is in her late 30s. Like, let her have some fresh air, Emily. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. Just let her roll down the window.
Yeah, we got more Emily and Mia. And I just love that one. How do you feel about them all traveling together?
I think it could have been a lot worse than it ended up being. I mean, you put all of these women in a car together, like that could have just been like apocalyptic, I can't talk anymore. Apocalyptic like endgame scenario, just with having all of these women in the car together who just don't always have like the greatest history and backstory with one another. And when you're around the same people constantly for that period of time, when just familial trauma is so volatile and can boil over, I'm surprised that it wasn't more disastrous than what it was. So I will chalk that trip up as a win, because it's like, at the end of the day, y'all didn't kill each other, and you could have, but you didn't. So yeah, some weird 2 thumbs up. I don't know.
Yeah, I really liked that episode. I thought it was a cute moment for them. Like, the first spa trip in season 2 didn't go as well for Emily and Lorelai, but this trip, despite the fact that Emily was kind of sullen because she felt out of place and upset at the fact that Lorelai is so free with her affection for Mia, but not with her. Like, it hurts her to see that. But I love that moment she has with Mia about, like, Rory not being so little anymore, and seeing her and Logan through the window and saying, like, she's a heartbreaker. I really like the Emily and Mia moments. I really wish we had gotten more of them. But Emily and Mia meet in both instances of Mia's return. So there's definitely some interesting things to explore there that I wish we had seen. But
is there anything else travel-wise that you feel like you would have wanted more from, or to have seen more of, that we didn't get?
You know what? I don't think we ever got Rory and Richard traveling together. I think they would have made awesome travel companions. And, he was so encouraging of her wanting to do that. And, he kept slipping her money for Fez. And it was so cute. They would have, visited all the great bookstores, and he would have told her all kinds of anecdotes from his travel as a younger man. And yeah, I wish we'd seen that. But she goes with Emily instead. And I think she may have come out of that summer perhaps a little better if it had been Richard and not Emily. But that's conjecture entirely. Richard's not great either on that front in terms of the pomposity and the entitlement and expectations for basically everyone serving him at his beck and call. So maybe it wouldn't have been much better on that front. But Yeah, I would have liked that. I mean, there's a lot of things about travel that we never got to actually see and we only heard about. That's the other one I would have loved is Michelle in California.
Yes. I went on The Price is Right.
And won $100,000 in cash and prizes. I want to see him getting his teeth done by the guy who does Nick Lachey. Like,
I just want to see Michelle on The Price is Right.
that too. Like, can we get Bob Barker in here and have like one of those like after that credits, you know how they run like video clips? I would have taken one of those with Michelle on The Price is Right.
I just want to, Michelle, what's your bid? $9.99. And the winner is Michelle. And then he goes up and he's like, I'm not going to attempt that accent because I will just embarrass myself. But I would just love to see like Michelle, like, you know, going up for bids and then winning what he wins and then going into like the showcase showdown and coming home with his prize and then just being like, Lorelai, Suki, guess what? I won. Like,
oh, that would have been so great. Oh,
like,
yeah.
comedy, just whatever. Like that just contact Yannick. Just be like, we just need to film a 10-minute something of you being on The Price is Right as like a spin-off.
Would have been perfect. Speaking of California, we haven't touched yet on Here Comes the Sun and the spin-off that never happened, the Windward Circle. Yeah. So yeah, like I think it was the first time we made it to the West Coast, and only like one of two times. I guess we get Lorelai in the revival and Jess in season 3, and that's about it. But yeah, Jess bussing out to California to see his dad is obviously a huge moment because it's the rupture of his relationship with Rory, and it's him going in search of himself and trying to find a path forward for himself. And he's just such a fish out of water. Like, I feel like there's a trope where New Yorkers are just like completely out of place in LA. I've seen it before. I'm thinking specifically of Sex in the City when they go, I think they go to the WB lot, which is funny because I think that's where a lot of it was filmed.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, I get it because again, I'm biased, but New York is better than Los Angeles.
I mean,
people fight me on it. People can fight me on it. New York is better than LA. Sorry, not sorry.
I haven't really been to either of them. The only time I've been to New York was for that Yankees game. We never made it into Manhattan itself, but I've also never been to LA, and I'm probably going to like New York more, just knowing myself, but I wouldn't want to live in either of them.
Oh, I don't want to live in either one of them either.
Yeah.
But I will still say that New York is a much better city.
Fair enough. I won't fight you on that. So, yeah, I really love seeing him making that trip and like just being so weird walking down the boardwalk, and the guy's like, "Are you lost? Like, can I point you in a direction? I've lived here most of my life. You know, it's not hard for me to tell you how to get somewhere." And he's just like, "No." I'm just gonna wander around the beach for a while until I find my dad. Like, just yeah. And they sort of like flip back and forth between Rory's storyline and Lorelai and Jess, and obviously that was sort of backdoor pilot for a spinoff that we never got to see. So, any thoughts on that?
I'm fine that we never got it. You know, I understand what they were pushing or wanting to go towards because that storyline was taking off people at the time that particular season was airing were so in love with Jess and Milo and the character and the actor that there probably was an audience for it, but I'm actually kind of glad that it didn't happen because I just feel like it would have just perpetuated lazy writing and it would have taken away from what Amy and Dan were already trying to do. And it just would have felt really false to me to have that sort of detraction with just seeing Jess in California where, like, when I don't think that's where he's supposed to be or where he's meant to be. And I just don't foresee that for him. So I'm fine that it never came to fruition. And it's nothing against Milo because Milo's great. I just think that was an idea that was stemming from almost sort of greed and maybe wanting to cash in on something that you feel like people would watch. But that doesn't equate to truthfulness within a character's arc and story. And I don't feel like it would have been truthful here for him.
That's fair. I mean, part of me wishes we had it because it would just be more like GG content, if you will. But I see your point. Like, it would have divided their attention. And yeah, Milo in California or Jess in California doesn't really fit. And so it might feel awkward until, maybe he can make some peace with his dad and get to Philly. Like if they had him stay with his dad for a year and then season 2 was him actually branching out on his own and like going to Trenton and writing his book or something, like maybe the end of season 1 is him sitting down to write the subsect. That could have been cool if they had carried it through to the points that we know happened in the show. But yeah, you're right. Milo was great and he was a very hot commodity at the time and he still is. And
a hot commodity.
Emphasis on hot. And he's so great that even my sister named her dog after him. She's a This Is Us fan. We haven't quite made the full inroads with Gilmore yet, but we're trying to get her there. So yeah, but she's a big This Is Us fan and named her precious little puppers Milo, and he is the light of our lives. So hopefully someday he'll make a cameo and you will all get to experience just how flippin' cute this guy is.
It's not hopefully, like he will.
Yeah.
He will. And Kate is not wrong in saying that like Milo brings so much joy to both of our lives. So yeah, the actor, but also again, the dog, you'll see him one of these days, but also the dog, an emphasis on the dog. You'll see him one of these days. He'll be here.
It's like the real Paul Anka versus the dog Paul Anka. Yeah. The real Milo versus the dog Milo. And speaking of Paul Anka, Milo does this adorable thing where when there's a dog on the TV, he gets very excited and starts barking at them and will grab a toy to show them, even though they're not obviously in the room. And so I really want to show him Paul Anka and see how he reacts.
I've seen this in person, and it's true.
One time he even did it with the small dinosaurs on Jurassic Park. Yeah. Guys, he's the light of my life and the love of my life. So sorry to my boyfriend, but
same.
He understands the Milo appeal. So yeah.
Again, this is gonna if we don't stop ourselves right now, this is just gonna turn into like a dog Milo love fest episode. So we don't need to go there. But yes,
it's true. But like segueing from that, we've got the real Paul Anka, which is an episode where Luke takes April on that math competition tour and chaperones that trip. And Rory also goes to Philly, like we touched on a little bit earlier, but we didn't really go into too much detail about it. And she shows up at their open house, and it's the last time we see Jess. So we know that that's where he ends up, despite not getting Windward Circle. So I love that episode. And I think, again, it's one of those things where it's like you're in Philadelphia, but you're really just on an interior set somewhere. But it's such a moment for Rory where she does give in and kiss him and pulls away. And she's like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I can't even cheat on him the way he cheated on me. I love him. And it clarifies things for her. And then she returns home, goes to Lane's wedding, and finds out that Logan's been injured. And it really just reinforces to her how much she loves Logan and how much she wants to try to repair the relationship and move forward with him. So I think that was a trip where she was trying to escape her problems a little bit, but she did come back with a firmer resolve and some clarity that she needed, even though it was kind of a shady thing to do.
Like a little bit. Like this much. Are there any travel moments that we haven't talked about that you feel like you want to mention as we start winding us down and closing out this episode?
Something we haven't even talked about yet is spring break.
Yes.
How can you forget the Sea Sprite Motel in Florida? And
You're right, I
that
can't.
whole, like, that episode is so great. Like,
It's like, it's Madeline and Louise in New York 2.0, but there's no Lorelai to pull you out of a bad situation. And you know those girls are getting up to some like not so great stuff that spring break week, which again, it's spring break. Most of us have been in college. Some of us have probably gone on trips like that, but who you know those two girls were probably getting into some situations they should have not.
they were on spring break for a month, if you'll recall.
Yeah.
Not a week. They went for at least a month, and they like
And that motel
lived spring break.
It was on the up and up. It wasn't seedy at all.
Not even a little. But I love that Paris and Rory were both like not into the idea of it at all. Like it was not their idea of a fun time. But then the weather sucks so hard that they're like, it'd be nice to be warm.
Yeah.
Again, relatable. I live in the lands of always winter. It's freezing right now.
But then they also have moments of just like wanting to watch VHS tapes in the motel room and then both just being like, we're in Florida. Like, should we leave the room? We should probably leave the room.
Are we doing this right? Like pizza and the power of myth. Yeah, you did not spend your spring break with Bill Moyers.
Yeah. But then they get out and like I love the moments when Paris just will like see something and she's just like, nope, I'm out. Back in the room.
I love how she paid off all the guys to bring them like the sunshade and all the chairs and the table and then she calls Rory Casper and tells her to put on sunscreen. She won't throw the volleyball back to the guys.
Yeah.
Oh, Paris on spring break is just something else. And then they all get drunk and call Dean.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the best part of that episode is when why am I blanking on his name? Glenn. Glenn comes out of the water and like, oh, Glenn, are you okay?
He's not.
Hot dogs. Ah! And he just starts like running and like serpentining up the sand. I'm so sad that actor doesn't act anymore. I mean, I guess he's gone on to do important things like becoming a therapist, but he just had such amazing comic timing and I loved him. And that was just his best moment. He was the GOAT of that episode.
He really was.
But, yeah.
Just and then like they zigzag and then the eventual collapse.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the moment where they're sort of sitting on the sand being like, oh, you know, we drank, we partied, we kissed. Let's go home. I have some air miles to burn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get the whole Sean thing, which is apparently his name. I don't think I knew his name until recently when Scott interviewed him on his podcast and said his name because I don't think it's ever said in the show. Mm-hmm. But the guy who flirts with Rory and is really only interested after he sees her kissing Paris mm-hmm. at the club. And oh, can we just point out the shins? Hello, it was amazing.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that was an epic episode. Like, as a Canadian, that kind of spring break culture isn't as common. Like,
okay, interesting.
We can't, like, most of us can't just pop down somewhere hot for reading week. Like, I'm sure some people do, but, you know, I certainly couldn't afford to go to California, like, because I went to school on the West Coast. So my choices probably would have been SoCal if I wanted somewhere warm, because getting to Florida would have been a nightmare. But yeah, that kind of culture wasn't really a thing. And so it's one of those interesting vicarious moments for me where I'm like, would that be me on spring break? No.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in college, like, you know, the whole spring break concept was always there. But I never partook in it either. And it wasn't from a lack of wanting to. It was just from a lack of, I don't have the money to do that. I don't have the financial resources to spring break for a week, even if, you know, my fellow college classmates and people that I know are. So I would have gone. I just couldn't because I didn't have the means to do so. Maybe something we'll also talk about when we get to like our episode on money, because that's coming up pretty soon too. So that could be a topic. But yeah, I didn't really ever spring break it, just because I didn't have the means to do so. But I feel like I would have enjoyed it if I had been given the opportunity.
Yeah, we both have a bit of a reputation as like the party girls of our gang, so we probably would have had a good time with that, just a little bit. But
Now
yeah,
that
no,
you
I get
say
it.
it, now that you say it, I find it so hilarious that you and I, amongst our friend group, are the party animals.
Yeah, that we are.
What?
Yeah, but you make a good point. Like it's a resource question a lot of the time. Spring break or spring broke. Am I right? And the only way that Paris and Rory were able to do it was they apparently shared a room with 6 girls, and I'm like, where did you put them all? That was not
It
a big
also
enough
sounds
room.
like a nightmare.
Absolute nightmare. And they drove, and then the flight back was paid for by Paris's air miles.
Mhm.
And I just find it hilarious that when they get there, Paris is like, hey, I cut 3 hours off the MapQuest estimate. And I'm like, oh my God, remember MapQuest?
Yes.
Remember the days before you
Yeah.
could plug your phone in and like automatically navigate yourself? That saved us on our road trip, but it also screwed us when we tried to find the Miller Potato Monument.
Boston.
And it kept telling us we were there, and we were absolutely not there because we were on a bridge.
Boston.
Boston.
Get your shit together.
You wicked confusing.
We just wanted to pay homage to the potato lords. Couldn't do it. So, I mean, thankfully we haven't been struck down. Because I think they knew we tried. But
Yeah.
Boston's gotta get us together.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Yeah. I paid my homage to the potato gods and the Gigi gods by eating tater tots earlier.
Yeah.
So I think I'm good with the gods right now. So
Again, we haven't been struck down. We're still here.
yeah.
You're seeing us recording right now, so I think we've been forgiven. But again, Boston, you got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Another one we haven't mentioned that I'll just touch on quickly because it's not like a huge thing, but Hep Aliens tour.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Seventh Day Adventist tour of the East Coast is
You gotta
a
write
fun
a
time.
hit song.
Yeah. I think my favorite part of that whole storyline was Mrs. Kim being the one who stepped in and organized it. And then she wants to check out Gil's van, and she's like, pop the hood. I need to check the engine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's basically
What's up?
that's basically the highlight of that one. And then there's a few more things we could talk about in terms of like, I want to talk a little bit about travel prep because we are prepping queens. We are very much organized to the letter. We have maps and we have plans. And like when we traveled last summer, we had everything booked down to the parking garages, which don't do that. Pick a parking garage, but don't prepay it.
Yeah. But
Just
it's not an
perfect.
exaggeration. If you saw, go back and watch our road trip to Harvard episode again if you want details on our road trip. But the planning that went into this from both of us, you'd probably be like, you two have issues.
Yeah,
There was a binder.
There was a binder with tabs and printouts and a cover that I made on Canva.
We literally spent months planning.
Yeah. So we know planning. But Lorelai does not like to plan. She is the type of person who will fly by the seat of her pants with everything.
It makes me so nervous.
She constantly wants to be moving and doing something, and like she's kind of always in survival mode, and that even translates to her traveling, where she just does what it takes to get by no matter what. And she is really good with rolling with the punches. And sometimes that bites her in the butt because when they're in the car at the beginning of road trip to Harvard, and she's like, oh, like we didn't bring any tunes. I've never been on the road for more than a few minutes before playing Highway to Hell. Like I need my ACDC.
Mm-hmm.
And later they're kind of left without snacks, and she eats the fuzzy certs out of her purse. And I'm like, Lorelai, maybe if you had like stopped to think for 5 minutes, you would have thought to grab CDs and maybe some Malamars. Like, how hard is it to grab a box of cookies on the way out the house? Like, what? And yet, when they go to Yale a little while later, she's like, packing everything you own is the only way to survive a road trip with Emily Gilmore. So I'm like, how do you not know that like an ounce of preparation makes all the difference? And yet you just fly by the seat of your pants and give us anxiety by doing it. Like, oh, just her like, the whole point is to be spontaneous and to not know where we're going. We can't be lost if we don't know where we're going. And my sense of adventure didn't translate to my offspring. And she has to try to like coax Rory into the spontaneity with her, which you can see her reticence and her like, if you just tell me where we're going, I can plot a course. And then she folds the map in the wrong way and just horrifies Rory by doing it.
Horrified me too.
I know. Is it smaller? Yeah. Then it's not wrong. Yeah. So, and
like physical paper maps.
Oh yeah, remember that? Again, just the early 2000s were a real time. But and the other thing that she did was just kind of push Rory to do things that maybe weren't the coolest in terms of like, you kind of invaded someone's privacy and just walked right into their dorm room and took pictures at her desk. And I think outside there was a sign that said residents only for reasons like, security and privacy. But no, just go ahead and ignore everybody else's boundaries and do whatever you want because you're Lorelai Gilmore.
Yeah, I'm not saying that was correct because it absolutely was not. But I remember watching that episode and also thinking, who in their right mind is leaving their dorm room, like the room, like just who's leaving that open where anybody can walk in?
Yeah, Susie had it coming a little bit, but like not necessarily because sometimes you just go to the bathroom or something and you don't think you're going to be gone that long. You trust the people on your floor. You don't think that like some rando from Connecticut is going to be traipsing through your hallway and coming into your room and sitting at your desk and touching all of your stuff. So I don't think that was the coolest moment, but it does really show the difference between Lorelai and Rory, where Lorelai is more spontaneous and impulsive, where Rory is methodical and thoughtful, conscientious. She likes to plan and prep and think things through, which can lead to rigidity. She has her moments at times when she can't adapt and she can't go with the flow. She says she's going with the flow, but then she pays a guy $20 to get her study tree back, like go with the flow, man. So they're very different people in that regard, and they have very different ideas about like what a fun and comfortable travel experience is like. And then the next portion of that is when we see them packing for their trip to Europe. And I can't believe how much stuff is in that living room. There's no way they got all that stuff into their backpacks. And they were negotiating down from 12 books to 9 and 3 toothpastes to 2. And I'm like, you do know that there's toothpaste in Europe. Like, why do you need to bring 3 toothpaste? And why do you need to bring 9
come
books?
on, like we would do that.
No, like when we've traveled, we brought 1 tube of toothpaste and shared it between us.
Okay, that's all. Yeah, okay.
I would never bring 3 toothpaste, not even for a full summer. Like I said, because you can buy it. It's an easy enough, like, toiletry to acquire basically anywhere.
Yeah.
It's the same all over the place. Europe is not, a place that has no corners.
I understand the preparation though.
Yeah, but that's not the thing to prepare. Like, it's the dumbest thing to overpack. Let's put it that way. And it just sort of goes to the whole mentality of you have no idea what you're doing and you're ill prepared for this.
Mm-hmm.
And, the fact that Rory wants to bring 12 books, I'm like, do you have any idea how heavy that's going to be? You have to traipse around Europe with that. Bring 1 for the plane and then ditch it and buy another one at a cool bookstore somewhere. Like, that'd be way better way to do it. And yeah, then they come back with all those souvenirs. And again, I am dumbfounded at how they fit all that stuff in their backpacks on top of what they already had with them. Oh, and they wanted to bring all the phrase books too. Like at the beginning of Here Comes the Sun, they're sitting at Weston's looking at the phrase books and like, when we're in Spain, we need to know how to say, does Antonio Banderas live near here? And when we're in Paris, does Johnny Depp live near here? And when in Rome, does Gore Vidal live near here? You look like me, but my ways are completely lost on you. And then they talk about bringing the phrase books because, again, this was a time before Google Translate and, smartphones allowed you to travel without phrase books.
Yep.
Don't they all speak English over there anyway? Ugly American party of one.
That's a hot take, but it's not a wrong one.
Yeah, Rory was kind of right.
Yeah, don't be ignorant
Lorelai was
like
also
that.
kind of right. I mean, not everyone speaks English, but when you go to places where they deal with a lot of tourists, you get plenty of people who speak more than one language. So you don't need to bring a phrase book for every country you visit.
Yeah,
maybe.
Agreed.
Again, with the weight in the bags, you will break your back. Yeah, it's just the whole thing. And then Wild. Remember when she's like trying to shove everything into her camping backpack?
Do I?
And it just like explodes, and she tapes stuff to the outside.
And then she can't find her permit, and she's like, I swear I had the permit yesterday. The other guy was here. He saw it. Just let me go. Please don't make me dig this out. Do you see how loaded this backpack is? I will never find it. And I love, too, that the guide that day, like the actor was her in real life boyfriend, husband, which just made it all the more comedic. But yeah, don't overpack if you need to find things efficiently and quickly.
Yeah, like we way overpacked for our road trip, but we had the car, so we had plenty of space, and we were sort of able to access all of our stuff at any given time if we needed to. So like it made sense for us. But when you're backpacking and staying in hostels, it doesn't make sense to bring 12 books. Just going to throw that out there. And they were like, I pictured a spry, accommodating, mustachioed gentleman helping us carry our packs. And it's just like, excuse me? Like, you can't be real about that, right? I would hope not, because again, with the entitlement, if that's the case, I doubt it. But, I think it's her just being silly. And then Luke takes them, and they're like, "Oh, spry and accommodating."
Mm-hmm.
And then he tells them about his plans with Nicole, which never materialize. The writers forgot what they established because he said that they were driving through Western Canada and then cruising to Alaska. But when he comes back in season 4, he said that they went on a 7-country cruise and there was snorkeling, so they had to be on a Caribbean cruise, which is very different. So I don't know where that change came in, but yeah, they forgot what kind of cruise they forgot what kind of cruise they planned to take, and kind of messed that up. But yeah, it just feels like such a weird vacation for Luke to take, and maybe it goes to show that him and Nicole were not a good pair.
Maybe.
Just maybe.
Yeah. Anything else we're missing or forgetting, though?
Oh,
any last or final thoughts on travel?
Is there anything else? I think we covered all the big stuff. The packing and the economics of travel, just the different. Oh, there was one more thing on the whole hostels situation and Emily's judgment about Lorelai staying in hostels with like younger kids. All the kids are doing it these days. Do you think it was appropriate for Lorelai in her 30s to travel like that and do things in a way that would be more typical of like a college student?
Yeah, why not? I'm not here to judge anybody for how they want to travel. If you want to have that experience, which it's something that obviously Lorelai never got to have in her teenage years or in her early 20s. She never got to travel because teenage pregnancy. She never got to see the world. So now she's wanting to have that experience now in her 30s. She's not hurting anybody. It's her choice to make. And if that's how she decides that she wants to spend her time in Europe, have at it and enjoy yourself and just have a good time. And it seems like she did. She didn't need to be staying in 5-star hotels and in, suites that were running you $1,000 a night. She didn't need to have the vacation that Emily and Richard would have had themselves or would have had in mind for her. She did Europe on her own terms and she enjoyed it. So good for her.
Yeah, but it's funny when they come back and they're in Rory's room and she's like, "Oh, smell this. I forgot that pillows don't have to smell like feet." Yeah. And then she says, "I'm glad I did this hostel thing in my 30s because I realized that it was a dumb idea to do the hostel thing in my 30s."
Yeah. But again, it was her choice to make. So
yeah. I mean, I don't fault anyone for wanting to travel on a budget. And that's, obviously the most affordable way to do it. But she seemed to be like, that was not the most comfortable way to travel. Yeah. But I love their joke about, the travel books that her mom gave her where the hotel room was $500 a night. And she's like, yeah, $500 a night in 1978. Like, yeah. What does a hotel have for $500 a night? And she makes a good point. And they're like, so I guess we're not going to stay anywhere that doesn't have a Chagall in the bathroom.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. I think that was my last point was her parents made a point where it's like, you can be spontaneous without staying in hostels. Like you can still stay in even like a mid-level hotel room would be more comfortable, more private, less of a party atmosphere. I think to movies like Euro Trip when I think of, the sort of hostel experience and doing Europe on the cheap. And, as someone in her 30s, I wouldn't maybe want to travel like that. Not that I can afford to do it the other way, but it wouldn't be my first choice. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why I haven't done it yet. But yeah, Rory was more in a place where I think it was maybe done more for Rory's benefit in that case. Mm-hmm. And Lorelai just kind of put up with it. Yeah, like they obviously had some fun and they came back with lots of souvenirs and stories. Lorelai tried to touch the Pope, but only got his car and was immediately shut down, obviously, by the guards, as anyone would be. The guards in the funny clothing. I love how they kind of tell that. But it's also clear that they're glad to be home when they're back. And I think that's sort of a big aspect of the travel in the show is not always just the trip, but also the return. Mm-hmm. And what it means to come home. Because for them, Stars Hollow is, is home. And Connecticut is home. So they get a chance to go out into the world and learn some new things, both about the world and themselves, and ultimately return to where it all began. Yet another full circle moment.
The show is not chock full of those. It's not like, what it does brilliantly and efficiently ever. So,
yeah. Any last thoughts before I wrap this up?
Not necessarily from a show standpoint, but just from like a personal standpoint. I understand that travel is not always financially doable for everybody, but taking time away from reality and from the landscape that you're in just has significant and established health benefits. So if you have the opportunity to see someplace else in life or travel and just get away, I would encourage you to do it. Because again, just there are health benefits to it. It's really good for well-being. And it's good to see the world and to experience other places and cultures and cuisines, languages, religions, amongst so many other things that you might not be able to if you never leave your doorstep. So go out and see the world if you can, because travel is a really wonderful and beautiful thing. And if you can afford to do it, and if you have the means to do it, just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're saying this to everyone, but you're also saying it to like a major homebody who just really likes to like be settled somewhere with all of her stuff. But you're right. Like getting out and seeing the world has been amazing, especially after the Panini ended. And, last year we finally got out and actually got to meet each other, And, you came up here for Comic-Con, and then we went to Ohio for that Game of Thrones convention, which was the first time I had interacted with other people besides you in person in like 2 years or more. So that was such a great opportunity, and it just reminded me how much fun it can be to go out and do new things and meet new people. And then obviously we had that road trip that was inspired by Gilmore Girls, which is just, one of the highlights of my life thus far. And, I came out of it with a ton of amazing memories and a boyfriend to boot. So, and, speaking of travel being good for the body, the mind, the soul, the spirit, we're going to be traveling later this year. And, we're going to be in Maine in September with a ton of other Gilmore Girls fans at the Fan Fest Society event. And, I'm really excited to go all in on that because I did the virtual event a few years ago, but I haven't done this in person before. And I'm like really jazzed to, one, go back to New England, two, see a part of New England I haven't seen yet, and three, connect with other people who love the show so much irrationally like I do.
Yeah. So if you're watching this and you're going to be there, drop us a comment if you're going to be at FanFest Algonquin, Maine. It's going to be a really spectacular weekend. We're so excited for it. And we really do want to meet more Gilmore Girls fans and just get to know more nerds within the fandom like us who we can just gush over this show about. So we hope to see you all there. We will be there. But that's, yeah. Travel's great. And this is just something that's really exciting that's happening in the fall that we're looking forward to. In the meantime, while we wait for FanFest to roll around, and we'll continue to talk about that, but go back and watch some of our old videos. If you're starved for GG content, while we all also just fingers crossed wait for revival. Amy, Dan, get it done. I'll light some candles in church this week for that. But yeah, just watch our old videos. If you want to reach out to us, our social media contacts are in the description below. And as always, we would appreciate your support if you can just like this video, subscribe to our channel, stay up to date on our content. We have a lot in the works and a lot of really good things down the pipeline that's coming and that we're just hoping to get to for content. So stay tuned.
Yeah. That said, coming up next week, we're going to be going back to school.
Back to school.
And having yet another conversation about education and how it's so important to the show and how different characters interact with different types of educational systems. Like how Jess just doesn't care about high school and how Dean initially doesn't care about college, but goes and then drops out. So we're going to have some more nuanced discussions. The last time we talked about this was mostly gifted students. And so this time we're going to be having a little bit more of a general conversation about how different characters interact with education and their attitudes about it. So I think that's going to be a fun one because I'm such a nerd. I love school. So take me back to school, please. But yeah, so that said, thanks for being here. We hope to see you again next week and see you next Friday for dinner.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.